take a while. And this is how you come down.
Alright, it's all natural light in here right now, just from the out the sliding glass door. And if you're watching this, I am probably already somewhere on the coast, on a beach, or in the forest somewhere, looking for a big old mature bear right now. So, in the meantime, let's hear what people have to say. This title, The Owl Man Answered Me. So, one last question for him, please. Hello, Steve. Lana here from Linwood again. You read my email less than a week ago from today. I was laying in bed starting to doze off in the evening listening to you when I heard my name and I instantly rebooted. Thanks for getting my question out there. Today I'm listening to the Owl Man and he said that someone had asked about their healing abilities. Thank you so much for that information. Lots of people on the thread were very gracious and kind, sending me suggestions and information to research on the subject. One man I came across named Kawani Lasparitis. He has written a couple books and been in contact with the forest people for many years. He has said that on occasion he has sent them to heal people. I emailed him, but I don't know how long it'll take to get a reply. So my somewhat strange question is for the Owl Man, if he could ask his Sabe contact, if he would be willing to send one of his people to meet with me in the Big Lake area of Washington State, as I have a place there I can go to stay. That's at the bottom of a DNR land. I've heard the Bigfoot have a society, a knowing or awareness of certain human beings like Kiwani and you, Steve, that are helping bring information to the people. They have ways of using their telepathy, I guess, kind of like a telephone to other Sabe in different areas. So I was wondering if you, Steve, would ask Owlman to ask his friend about me, Lana, specifically. I'm not ashamed to ask and have good intentions and not mean to use them. There are many people that have fruitful, beneficial relationships with these forest people, if both parties are willing and kind. Thanks, Steve, for broadcasting this for me. P.S. A funny note for you, Steve. I recommended your channel to a friend of mine. I'll call her Anne. She's a very smart network analysis body worker / chiropractor. She hasn't quite arrived that these things are real to her yet, but she did start listening to your channel, and she definitely took a liking to you immediately as a person, and said you bring a comforting and protector type energy. So, compliments to you. At the bottom is a note just for you. Alright, sorry, slight interruption there. A friend of mine came over with a whole pile of firewood for me from his work. It's really very cool. My buddy's got trophyhuntersportfishing.com. He's a logger as well and got me a load of fur firewood. Score! Now, where were we? Hooking people up to look for healing. I did that this once, okay? But please, you guys, I really, it's not that, it's kind of difficult for me to start going back in emails, finding people hooking each other up and making emails for each party, and I'm not really here for that, really. So hopefully in the future, if anybody has anything, anybody to get a hold of, they could do it in the comments section below the particular video, okay? Because everybody's listening to the same video, all right? So people want to hook up with each other, get a hold of each other, please try to do it in the comment section below in the future, alright, you guys? Now, who's next? Who's next? What's next? So as my eyes getting bashed out. This is titled 56 Years at Bluff Creek. Hi Steve, my name is John Harlan, and yes, you can use it. My story begins when I was about a year old. This was in 1966. My father started camping at Bluff Creek Campground in Six Rivers National Forest, Northern California. We went every year for 2 weeks. Before school, it was in October. After I was old enough for school, we went in August. You see, my father was a steelhead and salmon junkie. Yes, this is the same Bluff Creek where Patty was filmed in '67. The film site is approximately 6 miles upstream. We've had lots of strange happenings here over the years. The first memories I have of them is a loud screaming on the hill behind camp. My mom would pass this off as brakes on logging trucks. I had my first sighting in 75 or 76. We had just arrived at camp. Our parents were setting up camp and we were playing in another campsite. We saw a tall but thin, hairy creature in the forest a couple hundred feet up the hill. This is a very heavily forested area. If you've ever been to Northern California, if you have never been to Northern California, you owe it to yourself. Holy cow, the sun's just starting to come up behind a cloud, brighten up in here. The forests here are unequaled. Anyway, it was in dark timber, so not many details about the face, etc. It seemed to be stripping bark from a large fir tree. We watched it for a couple of minutes and then ran. We told our parents and they laughed, so I put it in the back of my memories. My next encounter would have been 78 or 79. I was 13 or 14. Me and several other boys, whose families camped there, were messing around by the bridge over Bluff Creek, about a quarter mile from camp. We heard an extremely loud scream up in the hill across Highway 96 from us. We all booked it back to camp. My next encounter came in the Kaweah River drainage in 1991. This is in Central California foothills to the Sierra Nevadas. We were out trout fishing and camping on the north fork of the Kaweah. We were all the way at the end of the road. When we arrived, we went fishing. We had crossed the river and were following a large game trail. About a half mile upstream, we found a deer leg laying across the trail, blood still coming out. That would be creepy. I remember telling myself it must have been a cougar. I've since learned that cats don't do this. Nothing does that. Nothing. No other issues on that trip. We camped and spent the night without any other stuff happening. I don't remember feeling threatened. Fast forward to 2001. I was living in a very small town southwest of Denver, Colorado. There was a dirt road that went from Deckers to Spiny Mountain Reservoir. Either Spinny or Spiny Mountain Reservoir. It was 30 odd miles across. I'd spotted a big flock of tom turkeys in a meadow up there. I'd also found a line of aspens snapped off along the road. They were broken about 7 feet high. This was a place that always gave me that feeling. I returned in turkey season with my shotgun. I was going to get my tom. I parked a half mile from the meadow and snuck down before daylight. I settled into some brush with a good view of the meadow. It wasn't long before I began to feel threatened. I can't explain it, but I listened and got the hell out of there. This was the first time feeling this, but not the last. I returned to that same meadow in early rifle season for mule deer, and again had to leave. Just felt like something was after me. I hiked and fished lots of rivers in Colorado and never had any issues except that meadow. I'll break this off here because I have lots more to tell. End of part 1. And that was an email all in itself. And then I think there's 3 and I got the next one. So this is camp at Bluff Creek Picks. Dad with a huge summer steelhead, 17 pounds. Now they're fish pictures, you guys, okay? It's not a Sasquatch or anything like that. So I just kind of rip through them. That's a beauty fish, man. That's a thick, fat steelhead. Next one, me with a green sturgeon at 77, a cup on myself at 12. Down Darlene and Simba Camp 2003. All right, that's a great fish. Really great fish. Now, it's a third email. 56 years at Bluff Creek, part 3. Hi, Steve, on with my story. My next experience came in the fall of 2006. I was taking my stepson hunting for blacktail. We went to a place high above the campground. There's a big meadow with a small pond in it. We parked half a mile up the road and walked down into the brush overlooking the meadow. It was foggy that morning. as it is in the coastal range in Northern California in October. We're having what we call an Indian summer, still in the high 90s in the afternoons, so I figured the deer would be hanging around this pond. As we got settled into our blind, I began to feel uneasy, and then downright threatened. As I always do, I listened to my instincts, and I got out of there. We hunted the rest of the weekend off of the GO Road, past a small forked horn that was way down a steep hillside, no more issues. My next experience was the following year in deer season. I had a hot tip on a large buck that was frequenting a clear cut up out of Salyer, California, Salyer, California, 30 or 40 miles from camp. I got to the gate after work on Friday night about 9 p.m., got in the camper shell in my truck to sleep, armed with a 308 single-shot handy rifle. I liked that little gun because it was easy to pack through the brush. I fell asleep only to wake up about midnight with that threatened feeling again. I told myself to tough it out. Soon pebbles began bouncing off my camper shell. I got up with my rifle and I left. I got up with my rifle and left, slept 20 miles down the mountain by the Trinity River without any further issue. I have to tell you, I can feel when they are around, but not always threatened. I've only felt threatened when I was armed. Next encounter was around 2008. I was sleeping in my tent at the campground at Bluff Creek. Middle of the night, I wake up to something breathing outside the tent. It sounded like a human with bronchitis. I lay there and listened to it for a minute or two. Thinking it was a bear, I said, "Hey bear," loudly, and it took off breaking brush as it went up the hill. Now at the time I thought it was a bear, until I heard several similar stories on your channel. My next one came at a campground down towards the coast from camp. I don't remember the name, but it was west of Willow Creek, California. I stopped so my girl could go pee. The gate was closed, so we had to walk about 100 yards down to the restroom. On our way out, something was whistling up on the hill. It sounded like a bird, but much louder. It continued to follow us back up to the road and our car. Never felt any threat though. Would have brushed this off as wired had I not heard lots of similar stories here. Forward 2012. I'm now living back in Central California, Bakersfield. I go up to Greenhorn Mountain with a friend from work for the last weekend of deer season. I hunt with a bow during rifle, which is allowed in California. We see a few does, but no bucks. On Sunday, as we are packing up camp, most people already gone, the screaming starts now. I've heard this before, we both hear it. He immediately starts trying to say it's a mountain lion, but I know better. Too long, too loud, too deep. End of part 2, more camp pictures. Dad in the 60s, the early 70s with a few steelies. Dad, Uncle Richard, and Dave Zebo with some summer steelies. Me and my son Chris had my lab with a nice chrome Chinook at the mouth of Bluff Creek. And a beautiful fall buck steelies also at the mouth of the bluff. Alright, he's kind enough to offer up a bunch of fishing pictures. Pretty cool. That's a beauty steelhead right there. But that's it. Now, did I miss one? Did I miss one? I think that was it, wasn't it? Because I saw the part 1 and part 2 in my inbox, and I did a search, and then I found a third one in 2 different emails. One was in Tell My Story, the other 2 were in Share My Story. Luckily. I don't see any other ones, so if I did miss out, then sure, man. If I did miss one or you missed one, send it back, all right, and I'll get it read. And appreciate you sending that in. Those are great fish pictures. And I don't think we have too many people have emailed in with direct experiences from Bluff Creek itself, right? And basically everybody who is aware of this topic is aware of Bluff Creek, Northern California, right? Due to the Patterson film being recorded there. Excuse me, the gun thing. You know what? Side note to no blacktail hunter. When I'm up north, whatever I've done in the past, guided, or gone on my own hunts for elk and moose, I always have a 300 short mag with me now. I used to pack a 300 ultra mag when I was guiding. 300 Win mag, I kind of left that in the in the gun case for quite some time now. The 300 short magnum seems to be my favorite. Everything's bitted with that rifle. But anyways, what I'm getting at is the blacktail hunting when I get back down here. I just pack a little Remington, Woodstock, blued barrel, 243. It's like packing around a freaking pellet gun. It's great. And that's what I use for my blacktail gun. Same reason. It's just like packing a toy gun, right? And it's more than enough rifle for a deer. Anyway, if I did miss one or you missed one, make sure you email us back, alright, man? Appreciate hearing from you for sure. And welcome to the Club of No Return. Sounds like you've been in it for a long time. Yeah, what do we got here? This is titled Red now. Thanks for the answers I've heard on your page. Thank you for your page and the answers to many of my questions. I became interested in forest people since the movie The Abominable Snowman came out in the mid-50s. Back then, getting honest information was hard to come by. You had to take everything with a grain of salt. I wonder how many people actually spoke of these beings in the 50s. Next, my grandfather on my mother's side was half Mingo, an outcast clan of the Iraqi nation. This man would tell me he was going to give me to the boogeyman. One day I saw some men picking up the garbage and asked him if they were the boogeyman. That is when he told me that the boogeyman lived in the woods and he would take little boys like me after dark. Next, I took my wife, who has passed a short time ago, to a place called Fort Necessity in the Laurel Highlands in southwestern Pennsylvania. She was born a short drive from there but was never there. She had an experience with a skunk a while back while camping in Florida. The other campers said she was dreaming. The next morning, after seeing the claw marks on the top of her tent, they didn't disbelieve her anymore. Okay, so I'm guessing you meant skunk ape, not skunk. Well, as we were going to see Fort Necessity, the visitors center was closed because it was close to dark. I said we could walk to the fort through the woods. When we were about halfway to the fort, we heard 3 tree knocks, at which time we didn't know whether to continue or leave. We made it to the fort, didn't hear any more. My grandfather, the Mingo, said his great-grandfather was there with George Washington during the French and Indian War. Of course he was on French leave during this event. End of email, just like that. Alright, man. Did you cut it short? It sounds like it. Either way, thanks for the email. And it sounds like you cut it short, so send another one, alright? And title it Part 2 or something. Okay, man? Now, what else do we got? Alright, here we go. What's this one? Mark, this is red. This is red. Club of No Return, and it's totally fine to share my name in your video. Hello there, Steve. My name is Mark Angers. And you can say it as you read it. No one produces RT. Nope, no one pronounces it right the first time they read it, so it's fine, LOL. It's NJ, essentially the N, like in French. Oh, Mark NJ. Gotcha. Well, okay, whatever. Anyways, moving along. I mainly want to start off with thanking you for the place you're providing to be able to have the discussion like rational adults. I also want to thank everyone sharing their stories about the Sabe. It's S-A-B-E, my man. I remember one of the emails you read about the First Nations superheroes. They mentioned it, but for some reason can't remember the spelling. So it will vary more than likely as I type this little novel out. It's S-A-B-E is what the natives' name for these people is. Sorry. And I choose to use it instead of the Bigfoot name that was given to it from the people that ignored the First Nations when they first came here. As I listened to your video about the Fed contacting you from April 4th. Anyway, I'm rambling. I grew up in a smaller town in New Brunswick. I love the forest, love going on hikes. My family weren't really all much for hunting types. Was an on and off and on thing with my dad and I, but nowhere as often as we go fishing. This is the best thing about the boat Hearst, in all honesty, was how easily accessible it is to get to somewhat remote areas in the forest. Great swimming areas, since Bathurst has three major rivers that we'd frequent to fish or go swim at some of the spots along the rivers. Nipisiguit, Middle, and Tetagouche River. Each one of them had very unique areas, all perfect locations for the Sabe for sure. The Nipisiguit was within a good 10-minute bike ride from my parents' house. There's a decent forest near my parents' house, was fairly close, so I spent a lot of my childhood in the woods. We had a few bears near there, not extremely close to the neighborhood, but mind you, but we had deer all over the place there. Back then I believed as a kid, but knew nothing at all back then, because my only exposure to the subject back then was from documentaries that may cover it, but turn around and call it fake at the end, mainly to keep us in the dark for sure. So when this happened, my friend and I had zero clue whatsoever was going on. It's only now knowing what I've learned here and doing my path to gain knowledge. Haha, celebrity biologist. That's the one I'm watching right now while I'm typing this and laughing pretty hard with you. I view the BFRO the same way. Total effing jokes. Anyway, back to the topic. During the summer of 2002, I'd spent a weekend at my friend's place for a weekend. He also lives along the Nipisiguit River. I know, my pronunciation sucks ass sometimes, you guys. I know, trust me. Near the Pabonneau First Nations Reserve. Probably about a 7-minute walk from the river itself, where his parents and grandparents had 2 camps there on their land along the river. Beautiful area. Slow rapids, fairly safe spot, if you're not totally stupid about it. We've been going here during my entire childhood. Teen years and early adult life until I moved out of Bathurst in 2005. A lot of the city's buildings were built by the rocks that they blasted in this area to be able to run logs through to the paper mill. So this area had a lot of hidden logs that could cause dangerous situations. Thankfully, this has never happened while we were there. Ever. But it was a possibility because this place history back in the day. So we know this area. My friend's family obviously know it a lot better because they live there, but I know it well. Never had we had anything strange happen till that one night, which I believe it was a traveler and not a local. Or if it was a local, we disturbed his hunt while we decided to walk down the trail to go to the river for a late night swim. Now knowing what I know, from what I've learned here on the channel, behind my friend's house, we'll call him John, since I won't share his name, in his backyard, there's a bit of a hill. The woods between his house and the river were only like 10 yards away from the house. Had a little clearing cut so we could snowboard there in the winter when we couldn't go up to the actual hills. At the bottom of that clearing was the trail to get to the main road that goes down to his grandparents' camp. Might be a 7-8 minute walk to get to the road from the trail. We're probably halfway through the trail. I noticed first that his dog started getting weird. His dog was usually totally chill and very obedient, so she was not very far away from us. But when I noticed her get weird and seem a bit on edge, I started feeling this weird feeling of dread, and there was this noise, like energy interference. We started weird buzzing hum, and the hairs on my neck go the F up. So I tell him, yeah, F it, let's go back to the tent trailer. And we then barely got to the bottom of the clearing and the forest effing shook. Couldn't see anything, nothing at all. But a chunk of forest shook as if something big was shaking 2 trees and all the roots around it were moving the bushes. I'm pretty sure I ran faster than the effing dog back up the hill. My buddy was not very far behind me, and back in the trailer we went, since that's where we were sleeping that night. We both slept on the far side of the trailer that was closer to the house. Neither of us were comfortable on the forest side of the trailer. Felt like whatever it was that shook the trees was still nearby. And like I said, back then Bigfoot was not on the mind. It's only from when I started really looking into this in the last 10 years that I figured out what happened. My friend conveniently doesn't remember that weekend because we also seen orbs the night after or the night before. Backyard lit up. Then seconds later, front yard lit up. And there was this orb floating there. Closed the blinds, ignored what we seen. My second encounter was a couple years later in 2004 on a trip to Ontario. I went on tour with my friend's band for a few weeks and we toured around Southern Ontario for a couple of weeks. Great time. When we were in Ottawa, our friend who lived there brought us to his father's cottage. It's a few hours from Ottawa. I think we drove for about 3 or 4 hours. A place called Haliburton. Little lake town. Kind of reminded me of the lake town in the old John Candy movie, The Great Outdoors. Spent a week and on a lake, crossed with the canoes one morning. We hiked around the lake for a good chunk of that day, and then later on went back to the cottage to drink on the dock. We made a fire that night, drank, stared at the fire, shot the shit for a while. Again, not a clue what we were hearing. We thought it was someone working on their camp, but late at night, we were hearing wood knocks. A few minutes later, this loud epping howl, or yell, but moan, gave us chills. We kept hearing wood knocks and faint whoops. We just kept asking, what the F is that? That's no effing wolf or coyote. Pretty sure we passed out not long after that. The next night was pretty much the same. Drank and smoked a little bit, not as much as the night before, but for some reason we decided to walk down the road late at night. Not really sure why we thought this was a good idea, but 19, 21-year-olds, you know, balls of steel, and we knew it all then, right? Yeah, that was dumb. And that feeling comes back. Same as the time with my other friend back in '02. Exact same feeling of dread and being watched. But this time there was an odd smell. Piss and rotting flesh. And the forest shakes the exact same way. Like a 20-foot wide chunk of forest. And zipped her right back to the camp, pretty much shitting her pants. Because whatever moved in there was big. So I asked her friend's dad, who was also staying at the cottage. He didn't seem like he wanted to talk about what I was trying to describe to him. So now it's making me wonder if he had something happen. It wasn't too long ago, or it was either on this channel or on Sasquatch Chronicles, that someone told a story about them having a sighting and an encounter in the same area around the same time frame, July, August 2004. So now looking back at those instances of shaking forest, so now I have a pretty good idea what was happening. Will it stop me, or has it stopped me from going on hikes? Nope, not one bit. Not one single bit. I'll go anytime. Again, anytime I get the chance to. A little bit too busy now, having a kid and a full-time job. I'd like to go to the woods a bit more this summer, unlike last summer. So hopefully this summer is different. Anywho, I could sit here and talk for hours about this. No way. I'm just kidding you, man. I've been looking into a couple local New Brunswick legends and very old folk stories, and they all scream Sabe. All the ones that I've looked into so far. My hometown, it's either Bathurst or Bathurst, has the Tetaguche Trail. It has the Tetaguche Trail. Troll. And the First Nations name here in NB is Gluskap. Miramichi has the Don Garvin Hooper. The story itself is a bit weird, but people say they hear it, and the howls they describe sound like Sabe. Again, thank you so much for what you do, Steve. I appreciate what you're doing and all the voices you share here. Best wishes to the family. I'll be sending more emails to discuss a lot of the things you and Owlman have said over the months. Pretty sure I haven't missed any videos. Hopefully we could have a couple beers if I ever make my way out there. I need to see the Rockies at least once in my life. My worry is not wanting to leave, though. Take care, Steve. Talk to you soon. All right. Appreciate the email, man. And there has been a bunch of sightings in New Brunswick. Sarah's from New Brunswick, Port Elgin. Been there. And that's kind of weird for me to see. I was standing where there's moose and looking at the ocean at the same time. That hasn't happened for me ever, anywhere. yet. But anyway, I don't know too much about New Brunswick offhand. I do know there has been a sighting there, and I believe somebody said something about a nuclear power plant there somewhere, maybe, and something happened there. But I do remember a story that Sarah told me at her father's dairy farm way out back, which is basically in the middle of nowhere. All spruce and muskeg back there. And they said that they were looking out back one night, and all of a sudden there was a frickin' bright light lighting up the forest back there. She didn't tell me this till I've known her for a couple of years, and all of a sudden she spit it out. I'm like, what? Then what? She's like, all right, we all went back inside. I'm like, what? So you guys saw a bright light illuminating, lighting up the forest back in the trees where nobody is, and you can't get back there unless you come from the paved road this way on the side of the house and barns. And then you got to go straight to the back, about half a mile down the pasture. And they saw this bright light, shrugged it off, went back inside. That was it. End of story. Isn't it crazy how many people have had that happen? They see something very, very odd. Well, I've done the same thing, right? Really. Except I videotaped a couple lights the one time I seen them, but another time on that same mountain where I videotaped those two moving lights at about 5 in the morning. I was driving up the highway at about 9:30 at night. It would have been minus 20-ish at the vehicle, middle of winter, and way up there, the top of those mountains, I saw about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 very bright lights against the sheer rock face. We were looking up there and I'm thinking, oh, well, there must be a bunch of mountaineers up there practicing their overnight sleeping shit or something on the rock faces hanging by ropes. I don't know. Kept driving. What a dumbass, right? What an absolute idiot. And I should have stopped and videotaped that, because if it was minus 20 or so down the highway, how frickin' cold was it up in the top of the mountains? And who in their right mind would even be doing those potential exercises that time of year? Hey, let's go to the top of the coastal mountains and rappel off or climb the mountains or let ourselves down and hang by ropes at about 10 o'clock, 9:30 at night when it's probably minus 35 or 40 up there. Said nobody ever. Right? And I kept driving. Anyway. Alright, here we go. What else do we got? Who else do we got? Come on. It's not letting me. Seriously? Sorry guys, give me 1 second. If I don't mark it as red, you know what's going to happen. My wife and my 80-year-old mother was up in a remote wilderness area in Washington State. The encounter was brief, however, changed my life forever. I worked for the state as a DNR warden, and I patrolled this remote area for 22 years and never encountered anything like this, and I already read it, and that's what happens when you don't mark it as red. Alright, let's try this one. Hope this isn't the same deal. I live in Colton, Oregon, about 30 years now, and used to hunt quite often here. Every time I go into the mountains, weird things would happen. Never gave Sasquatch a second thought in those days, so I would always attribute such things to what I did know, or to that was weird file. I've had pine cones thrown at me, squirrels, so I thought, 40-pound boulder thrown 40 yards out of a forest into the Molalla River when I was fishing. Roars and screams at 3:15 a.m. behind the house during full moons. Whoops. Chest beating. Bipedal heavy steps coming up behind my tree stand in the dark morning, but could never ever hear it leave. Sticks beating trees on 3 occasions. Then one day after a new snow, I found barefoot tracks at about 2,500 feet crossing the road. I had to jump from one track to the next. In about 96, I had an animal trace my scent down a mountain behind me for a couple hundred yards, making all kinds of noise. As it came to the forest line at 20 yards, it stopped and stared at me for a couple minutes. When it seemed to comprehend what I was with my bow aimed at his chest, he started weaving side to side nervously. It was about 7 feet tall, with 3-foot wide shoulders. It backed up slowly and traces its steps back up the mountain. also had one walk within 30 yards of my father's front porch. It looked at us, grunted, and just walked across the street and into the forest. After my sighting, it seemed to know where I lived, in the same mountains I hunt. It occasionally slaps the house, slapped the hood of my car, thanks for the dent, and occasionally stands near the front door and stinks up the place for 2 days. Not in a menacing way. I feel it's just saying, still here. Anyway, there's more. That texting makes my hands go numb. Thank you for what you do. There is more to them than just being an animal, because things have happened that I prefer not to mention. Way past weird. Rich. Okay, Rich. You've possibly been here long enough. You've possibly been here long enough that you should have the encouragement to let her rip with what you know, because everybody does here. And so far, it seems to be quite painless for all the people who have shared here, and on average, it's been a good thing for each person after they've shared. So maybe, if you could you share with us what you have seen, witnessed, or learned? Please. And because it will possibly help somebody. If it doesn't help one, it might even help numerous people, you never know. But all it can do is help people here. It doesn't harm anyone. It won't harm anyone. It won't harm the person who's sharing. Anyway, that's my motivational plea, to share more if you can one day. If you feel like it, we're here. We're here waiting. Appreciate it. Appreciate the share, man. So many freaking people. So many people. Okay, this one's a monster. Well, no, it's not. Okay, I'm gonna go for it. And then I gotta get going. I gotta pack my stuff. I gotta pack the boat up, the motor, the gear, the hunt gear, myself. I think I gotta get up tomorrow morning, 4:30, and get out of here. Steve, Jeannie here. Saw the last Rumbo video today, April 26, 23. I stated I would send you this. Dear Steve, Sarah, and family, I'm writing you today, Steve, Club in a Return, how to hunt because our morals, ethics, and integrity are the same, and we are driven towards truth and saving our fellow Canadians and humanity strongly. Can't stop or won't stop. This email is regarding the class action lawsuit in regards to the COVID-19 vaccine false narrative. All right. We're going to have to save that for the other channel, unfortunately. Oh man, another interruption. Back again. It's been like, I don't know, over an hour and a half since I sat here when I shut the camera off last. Anyway. Tough time to get things done when you do it this time of day for doing this. This is titled, Kids and Greasy Handprint ? Dear Steve, please do not share my identity out of respect for others' involvement. Thank you for shining light on the secrets, corruption, and lies of the powers that be are dishing out. Thanks to your submitters, I finally have the answer to a 45-year-old mystery. In the mid-70s, we lived in Prince George in a new subdivision. One night, my 3-year-old son woke screaming. He was finally soothed and returned to sleep. The window to his room was about 6 feet off the ground and faced a blank neighboring wall. In the morning, I was able to get more details about what he saw. And he said there was a, quote, black man, end quote, peering in his window. There were very few people of color in the city back then, so I dismissed the idea that it was an actual person. I was in my woo-woo phase back then and wrote it off as a spirit visiting him, but it just didn't feel right. He said the black man wanted him to come out and play. Shocked and very afraid, I told him that if the man ever came back to tell it, my mama says no. To this day, he very clearly remembers the incident and will not sleep without his curtains drawn. And yes, he has had strange occurrences in the woods, but not keen to speak about them, so I've encouraged him to check out this channel. 10 years ago in southeastern BC, I'd driven several kilometers up a logging road to wait for my partner to fish his way up a creek to me. The pull-offs were very few, so it resulted in driving farther than I really wanted to. Nature was really calling to my bladder by the time I came upon the most beautifully serene moss-covered spot, shaded by huge cedars to wait. Curiously, this perfect spot had no previous signs of campfires. I'd only gotten a few paces from the truck when I was gripped by a fear I have never experienced in the bush and realized this hauntingly beautiful spot was dead silent. Dropping my pants there was not an option. I waited in the locked truck as long as I could, about 1.5 hours, before tracking down the fishermen on the road. I later learned this part of BC is another hot spot for the sabe. The attached photo was shared with me by a family member from north central BC. It was found on a skylight, only accessible by a ladder. Shortly before moving, another greasy handprint. When I first started watching this channel, the topic scared me badly. Now, with the advice from yourself, Dave, Scott, and your contributors, I think I would rather have the forest people as neighbors than that politician from the east. A note for Steve. Okay, this note's good for everybody. As a guide, I'm sure you're aware of some of this. I contracted Lyme disease up in the Burns Lake area about 1985. U.S. brought bioweapon tick expert to Plum Island after World War II. Only 8% curable at best. Less if it goes chronic. Mine's chronic. Physicians in Canada can lose their license if they treat it for longer than 1 month. I've been treated by 3 Lyme literate doctors, 2 at my own expense, for a total of 6 years. I'm still sick. I'm still trying to squeeze as much out of this life that I can. Not looking for pity, just to spread the word. Lab tests in Canada, useless. Out of country labs, lab costs run in the thousands. I keep doxycycline in my truck at all times for embedded ticks. 6 weeks of treatment necessary if caught soon enough. There is no safe time for them to be attached. The jury is still out, but also probably sexually transmitted like syphilis. Government is telling everyone it is curable, and due to fact an infected person usually looks well, even family will think you are a liar. Canlyme.com. CANLYME.com. Be safe and thank you. Okay, thanks for the note. Thanks for the picture's kind of creepy, right? Imagine seeing that on top of your skylight out of the middle of nowhere. Crazy. Welcome to the Club of No Return. And on the Lyme disease thing, a friend of mine in the past had driven down to California with his wife and 2 dogs. Stopped to let the dogs pee. Dogs got back in, and next thing you know, there was literally dozens of ticks crawling around the frickin' SUV they were driving, and they both contracted Lyme's. And I don't remember all the intimate details, but he did say that in Canada, that they basically don't even acknowledge it in Canada. So you're SOL in Canada. But in the States, they have obviously better treatment there. But I do recall, like, he couldn't sleep for the longest time. We're talking months and months and months, never had a good night's sleep ever. It was pretty crazy to watch the stress and the effects of that. But then he was finally found some sort of treatment. But I remember he had to go in to a health clinic in Squamish, British Columbia, and was doing intravenous work. I forgot how often it was. Every couple of weeks, once a week, once a month, don't remember. But I do know that there was people there in Squamish, some healing place, natural path possibly, that were on it and made a huge difference for it. Maybe Sarah used to go to the same place for something else, but knew the place. And I think they moved their shop to a different location, but I'll find out from Sarah later and see if I can't make that information available for someone, because I know that Lyme disease is very serious and very debilitating. It's not good for whoever comes in contact with it. It's really, really bad, and especially if you get it up here in Canada, Stan. Right? It's not good. Anyway, thanks for the email. Appreciate you, what you shared. And you come across more, make sure you share more, alright?
man.